The public has a long-held fascination with detectives. Detectives see a side of life the average person is never exposed to. In this podcast series, I Catch Killers with Gary Jubilant, I will be interviewing real detectives, taking the audience into their world, a world that is rarely seen by the public. I spent 34 years as a cop. For 25 of those years, I was catching killers. That's what I did for a living. I was a homicide detective. I'm no longer interviewing bad guys, instead I'm interviewing detectives. The guests I've selected are the cops I consider real detectives. Their business was catching bad guys, and they were prepared to go into a world where pressure, risk and sacrifice was the norm. These are their stories. I'm so excited about our guest on I Catch Killers today. He's an absolute legend, a great detective, and seriously, one of the world's nicest blokes. Retired Detective Chief Inspector Angelo Memmolo is a name the crooks feared and the cops loved. I can honestly say I've never heard anyone in the cops say a bad word about Angelo Memmolo. Listeners today are going to get a rare insight into the life of a detective. Ange's openness and honesty are why people gravitate towards him. In part one of the podcast, Ange will take us on a journey through his early times in uniform, working at Redfern during the riots, the wild ride he had as a young detective in the armed hold-up squad. Armed bank robberies were a daily event and tactical arrests of armed and dangerous offenders were a regular occurrence. We also talk about the murder of Ronald Mills, who was shot in the head at his home. This murder was linked to a woman who was also shot in the head with a crossbow. The investigation led to the arrest of Paul Offer, who subsequently plotted to murder Ange from prison. Let's get started. Angelo Memmolo, thanks very much for coming on to Real Detectives podcast.
Thanks, Jubes.
It's been a long time.
It has been a long time, mate. It has been a long time.
You're looking good?
Yeah, well, better than you.
Obviously, you've been training. I won't even ask that question.
No, you're joking, mate. You're looking well as well, buddy.
Well, thanks, Ange. Now, just before we get started, a few formalities. Mm-hmm. You agree to participate in this interview?
Oh, here we go. Yes, I do.
Ange, we've got to follow the rules.
Okay,
you understand it's important to follow the rules, don't
I do.
you?
Do I need a solicitor here?
Not at this stage. I'll let you know if you need a solicitor. I promise you.
Okay.
And you're giving me permission to record this.
I am, and that's a first for you to ask permission, but yes.
Well, it takes a big man to learn from their mistakes, Ange, and I think you should acknowledge that.
Yeah, I do, mate.
Look, Ange, before we start, I just want to say this, and I'm being sincere here, that I went to your send-off. You've been in the cops for a very long time, and you had a send-off about a month or so ago.
Correct.
And I've got to say, out of all the police send-offs I've been, that's one that gave tribute to a person that's clearly made a difference in your chosen career.
Thanks,
now, before
buddy.
you get humble or say, what I saw there was the amount of people that turned up, first of all, but the cross-section of people that were there. There weren't just detectives that you worked with, they were people that went right back to your uniform day, turning up to pay tribute to your career. There was victims' families of victims that you've worked for and helped. There was retired coroners or ex-coroners, prosecutors, a whole range of people there, Ange. So I think it was a reflection of your career, and it's something that you should be very proud of, and together with your family that was there too. So here's full cheers to you.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate the nice words, and look, it was very humbling to have those people, including yourself, mate. And I know you were the butt of a couple of jokes there during the proceedings.
I'm not taking them personally.
Recording the proceedings, but yeah, look, it was unreal. It was, I was each way about whether or not we have or I should have a send off, and I was worried that only 20 people would turn up, and it was embarrassing and all that sort of stuff. But it's really important for the families, I think, for my family to be there, and they're the ones that are pushing to have the send off as well. So it was a great night, or great day and great night.
Great and night. Yes, it continued on a little
Correct.
bit. But yeah, your family there, and you could see how proud of
I'm very proud of them.
So yeah. No, it was great, but full credit to you.
Thanks, mate.
Anyway, to the podcast, to the questions. Why did you join the police?
Well, this might sound funny, but I truthfully wanted to join to make a difference. I thought the cops is an honourable thing to do. Funny enough, my dad was a cop.
Yep.
My uncle was a cop back in Italy.
Yep.
Obviously, I'm the son of an immigrant from Italy, and although he didn't enjoy it as much as I did, he stayed in for a couple of years. That wasn't the reason why I joined, but I've got that heritage behind me. My uncle actually died in the cops over there.
Oh, right.
Chasing a crook in Rome, I think it was.
What were the circumstances there?
Well, I'm not entirely sure because Dad never really talked about it, but he got hit by a tram. My understanding is he was chasing a crook and got hit by a tram back in those days.
Yeah.
There was a lot of trams and what have you, and he got killed instantly. To answer your question, pretty much just to make a difference. I saw it as an honourable profession, and I wasn't wrong.
Right. So that was 86 you joined?
Correct.
And uniform?
Uniform, straight over to Redfern from the academy.
Right.
And, there was, I say this about every part of my career in the cops. One of the best times in the cops for me.
It's a good way to look back at your career if you look at each portion of your career.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure that you could do the same thing, mate. I learned a lot of stuff. When I first joined the cops, one of the first jobs was a 5-car accident. I still remember this till this day, and I thought, oh, shit, this is a massive job. It's a massive job. 5 cars, all up the arse of each other. In fact, it was quite a simple job. But
just to bring the public in on that, like a 5-car accident, I can reflect back into my uniform days and probationary constable. That would have been beyond belief. Where would you start?
Correct.
With the amount of paperwork.
And now you look at us now and you think that was just an absolute nothing burger. But learning from some of the great people who worked there.
Yeah.
Redfern was pretty exciting in those days. You had obviously the Aboriginal community, the Koori community, that was at loggerheads with the police, and that was generally a very, very small part of the population there. I had a lot of respect for people within that community, but also a lot of old hardheads lived in that area, in old organised crime.
Yeah, it had that reputation. It was a hard-ass suburb, wasn't it?
Yeah, and you had a lot of drugs coming through the area, and it was exciting, mate. We were driving around in paddy wagons and chasing cars, chasing crooks, foot chases. It's pretty constant sort of work, and it was busy.
Yeah.
Which I really liked, and it was a fun station as well.
It's a good way to cut your teeth.
Yeah, absolutely.
In an environment like that. And I saw at your send-off there was a lot of people that you work with.
From Redfern, and really good people. It was great to see them. I hadn't seen them for years and years and years.
You were there for one of the riots. It's referred to as the Redfern riots.
Yeah, it was. I think it was 88 pretty much 88 riots or 87 riots. I can't remember now, but
what was that like as an experience?
It would have been the 88 riots. Look, it was bloody scary.
Just to explain, that when we say riots, there was conflict between the police and the local Aboriginal community.
Correct.
And it got very violent at stages, and so the riot squad, shields, and
well, they had them in those days. We didn't have those.
Yeah.
Back in that day, we had the TRG.
Yeah.
And they were hours away.
Yeah.
So I think we were about the second or third car off, and I was in plain clothes at the time.
Yep.
So we were doing the car A, which was a detective's car that looked after the whole of Sydney district in the metro area. Redfern, Central, Kings Cross, and Surrey Hills area.
Yeah.
So we looked after that, and we heard a double beeper come over, saying police needing assistance in
a
Everly
double
Street.
beeper on the police radio, and just for those that don't know, if you got the double beep, it was police need urgent assistance. So all cars respond.
Correct.
It's a matter of urgency.
So it was an urgent run there. We were in, I think, around the edges of the city. So we roared back there, about the third car off at that time.
Yep.
And what had happened is one of the uniform crews had seen a bloke wanted on warrants.
Yep.
Arrested him. And around that time, a bit of background is, every time we drove down Everly Street, we had rocks pelleted us. There wasn't a time that you could drive down there without having rocks. Every time you drive down there, you'd have a broken window. It's very rare. Sorry, not every time, but very rare.
On the police cars be
getting attacked by rocks, and they were stockpiling. There was intelligence they were stockpiling rocks and what have you. And if you drive down Everly Street was, how would I say, it was an area that was poor.
Yep.
And clearly needed some upgrading, and there was houses being demolished and what have you. So there was a whole bunch of bricks and concrete blocks.
Yeah.
So we arrived there. We assist with putting, and at the time we were trying to put a fellow in the back of the truck, paddy wagon, and as we were throwing him in, the guy in front of me, a policeman in front of me, copped a brick straight to the head, and he went straight down. Yeah. And it was just a volley of rocks and concrete and what have you. We threw him in the back, and we got forced back. So we had no shields in those days, no helmets.
Yeah.
You had your baton, which I disliked using, hated using the baton, so I never used it.
Yeah.
So we got pushed back from the back of the paddy wagon, and we see him get released. We didn't have time to lock it, and we got pushed back, because it was just an absolute, like it was raining rocks and bricks and concrete. And as I said, the guy who fell, we picked him up.
Yeah.
Took him back.
Were you scared at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't say to be in that position that you weren't scared. Like, I wasn't quivering or anything like that. But you're worried that the fact
a uniform doesn't protect you.
No, absolutely not.
You're still hurt.
In fact, you think you're Superman when you join the cops.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's pretty true. And the guy in front of me that got hit by a brick ended up going to hospital, and he had his skull fractured, and a piece of his skull went straight through his brain.
Yeah.
So, he's lucky he didn't die.
Yeah.
So we get pushed back. Then somebody says, we've got 2 cops in the paddy wagon. The big F-150s, massive trucks.
Yeah.
And we end up pushing back to rescue those 2 guys. A girl and a guy.
Physically forcing your way through to
forcing
get to
the way, still waiting
place.
under the fire of rocks and bricks. And we found the cab flattened by about 2 foot.
Right.
They were literally standing on top of the cab and pounding it down.
With the police in it?
With the police in it.
Right.
We dragged them out of it. We ended up trying to open the doors, and it was bloody hard. We grabbed them.
And whilst this was going on, there's rocks coming?
Still going, yeah. And single one was called during that time. Yeah. So single one is a 3B bar. Yeah. Means police not only urgent, but it's we need as much backup as we can get.
Yeah.
And with the single one, you get police from everywhere. We end up getting police from Campbelltown down the track.
Yeah.
But still, they had plenty of rocks, and in fact, part of the community grew. That riot grew.
How many people are you talking about?
You're probably looking at about 20, 30.
Yeah.
And when you look at them being armed with what they had, they were just forcing us back. We had no protection, whatever. Yeah. Eventually, we were able to quell it and arrest a few of the offenders.
I asked this question, and it's something that the public might think, well, if this is going on, you felt your life was threatened?
Absolutely.
At that stage. Was there considerations at any time during this of firearms being used? Or?
No, not at all. You can't.
That would have
as much as your life has been threatened, you could have been killed by that.
Yeah.
It wasn't justified, I don't think.
Yeah.
It's a last resort for us to use our firearms.
And thank Christ it wasn't.
Yeah, correct.
You could imagine
it would have been an outcry. There was outcry the next day. I mean, that we invaded their area, and that was coming mainly from the white people. That we forced them. People like Mick Mundine, who's a great supporter of the Koori people, but also of the cops at the time. He was very supportive of the cops. I remember there was a nun there who lived in a street just off Everleigh Street, blaming us for the riot, and then we actually came in there, and that was very disheartening. That was the first time I actually faced criticism from the community for what we were trying to do. So that was pretty disheartening.
Yeah, well, when you join the cops, you think that you've got the community support. You're there to lock up the bad guys and deal with the bad guys, but it's such a complex issue, or it was in Redfern, and still to this day there's issues. But so with the riot, the police in the car, you got them out.
Got them out. They were injured. Obviously, they had to be taken to hospital. TRG eventually arrived, Tactical Response Group. They arrived, and they had the shields, and
they're the police in the overalls and the riot gear.
There was only a handful of them. There was only 5 or 6 of them. But we were able to use their skills. I remember Bugsy Mary was one of the guys in front of me. I don't know if you remember Bugsy Mary. Pretty well known in the TRG. He copped a concrete block on his foot, being hurled, and it broke his toe.
Yeah, yeah.
And he just let out this scream, and he's fucking swearing and carrying on. Like, it was quite funny, even that little part.
Yeah,
Or, you know,
yeah.
I had a smile on my face when
Yeah,
that happened,
yeah.
even though he was heard.
Yeah.
The way he carried on and swearing
Yeah,
and carried on
I
was
can
a little
imagine
bit
him
funny.
carrying on like
Yeah. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
Really good guy.
And so, okay, that was an experience. You were in plain clothes at the time.
Yeah.
How long were you in uniform before you went to plain clothes?
2 years.
2 years. And what made you want to pursue a career in detectives?
Oh, you know what? I really enjoyed uniform, and I was really enjoying it at the time. And somebody asked me, said, well, one of the detectives come down and said, I think it was the detective sergeant at the time, said, you know, you considered going to plain clothes, which they used to do on the time.
Yeah.
I thought, you know, eventually I'd like to. I thought, you know, what the hell? They're asking me, so I might as well take the opportunity and move on it.
So you went to Redfern Detectives?
Yeah, correct.
And how did you find your early days in plain
Oh,
clothes?
great. Look, I had some really good teachers there.
Yeah.
Brian Saunders, Gary Phillips, who's just recently passed away.
Yeah.
We did a couple of murders there.
Yeah.
And I really cut my teeth
Yeah.
on the basics like breaking enters,
Yeah.
you know, locking up the smaller type things, not what we do now, what we did. So you learn your bread and butter stuff, armed robberies, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
It would have been a busy area, Redfern.
Yeah,
at
it was
stage.
really busy. Yeah, really busy.
Yeah. How did you feel your first arrest that you've taken from the start to the end as a detective?
Oh, look, it was great. Like, and you know, you get the pats on the back and all that stuff. You never did it for that, but more so, you're able to, you know, give the victims. Yeah, it was good telling the victims, look, we locked somebody up for that breaking in on your house.
Yes.
We're able to recover some of the, and you know, like you felt like a bit of a superhero to a certain degree.
It's good. Well, when I say it's good, when people are in need of help and they come to you, a crime's reported to you, there is a lot of job satisfaction in bringing that to conclusion.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And that's what I liked about plain clothes or CI work.
Yeah.
Is to be able to follow it from go to wire.
And you got to wear fancy suits.
Well, not so fancy in those days.
What did you wear in those days?
They were just pretty much like now. Nothing gets more expensive than a couple $100, but back in those days, you know, $20, $30 suits.
Fashion wasn't
short
the best.
sleeve shirts.
Yes. Yeah.
With a tie and pretty much a pants and a jacket that never matched.
that was, you could spot a detective a mile away, couldn't you?
Correct.
Ill-fitted sports jacket.
Correct. You rush out to I can't remember the places that you go out and get your cheap suits from. And there's a place in Alexandria you get cheap suits from, and
that's right.
Like $50, $60. I mean, we couldn't afford much more than that anyway.
There wasn't a lot of money, and I know if ever you bought a good suit or you bought the good stuff, you always ripped it, or
Correct.
You got into a wrestle and you wrecked it.
Correct.
So, how did you carry your firearm?
That's a pretty good question. We had 38s back in the day. I had it on my ankle.
Yeah.
And it was Velcroed at one stage.
Yeah.
Until I was chasing a crook in Everleigh Street.
Yeah.
One of the Quinlans.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
He was, Quinlan's was, one of the big time.
Yeah.
He was Koori, but he was a pretty good crook and a pretty good armed hollow.
Stick up blokes.
Yeah, offender.
Yeah.
And he paid for a lot of stuff on overtime for us, once we got the armed hollow squad. But I ended up seeing him in a pub. We walked through a pub and we weren't going in there for a drink. We were walking through, we heard one of the Quinlans might be there. And sure enough, he was.
Yep.
He bolted out the door and he could run like the clappers. He was quick, he was fit. I had the gun on my ankle and went sliding towards a whole bunch of very angry people on the other side. I ended up grabbing the gun and they started throwing rocks and what have you, so I just quickly retreated.
It came off the ankle.
It slid right off.
I'd lost mine across Bennett Hills Road, across 4 lanes. Exactly the same thing, chasing someone. Maybe the ankle holsters weren't that good.
They weren't that good. I ended up putting a buckle on it, taking it to a leather maker and putting a buckle on it, but they weren't that good.
No, and you can't wear them now because we could only wear them when we had flares.
Correct. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And the old timers used to wear the shoulder holsters. That was.
We can never get over that.
No, I must admit I had one. I thought I
did. You really?
Yeah.
You're a wanker.
No, it was cool at the time.
Oh, yeah.
The cool guys had the
correct.
shoulder holster.
Shoulder holster.
Yeah. But no, it's interesting. But yeah, the time in plain clothes, it opened up a whole new world, didn't it? And,
Oh, look, it did. Yeah, like you end up understanding the criminal
yeah,
code a lot better. The criminal courts. You end up going from the local courts to a district court. Which when you're a young fellow, that's massive. And then I gave evidence once at the Supreme Court when I was still at Redfern.
Yeah.
And that's overawing. When you've got the judges in front of you, you're giving evidence in front of 12 members, jury members. You actually cut your feet in court.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, 100%.
Cut your teeth, right?
You you would have been beat up in the witness box time and time again.
Time and time again.
Yeah. It's almost like a rite of passage.
It is, and you got smashed to the point you didn't even know your name by the time you walked out of the box.
I took to wearing white shirts so they couldn't see the unsightly sweat stains.
Didn't you sweat?
Yeah,
you used to sweat like all get out
of the witness box. No, that was cool. That was I'm not worried. And
you know what? You're there telling the truth, but somehow they twisted your words, and God love them, they did their job.
Yeah.
Defence barristers, some very, very good defence barristers. They made you look like an absolute liar.
I think people don't understand that. They think, well, if you're just getting in the witness box to tell the truth, how could that be pressure?
No,
but I have prepared and I've got in the witness box. I'm thinking, I've got everything right. It's very simple what's going on. And then you get asked a question. And I remember time and time again sitting there thinking, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I wish I had thought of that.
Correct.
But yeah, well, I suppose some of them are getting, even back in those days, $5,000 a day to make you look stupid on the decision you made probably when you've been up all night.
Correct.
And made on the spot, and then you've got to justify it. So I don't think people understand the pressure that comes from being in court.
But, from your mistakes, you learn to be better detective. So, there's a lot of mistakes that have gone along to make what we are now. Jibs, you'd be the same. You don't make them from making the right decisions all the time. You don't get to be better by doing it.
Yeah, and I think the detectives these days are not getting the exposure to court that we got.
Correct.
And I like the battleground of the local court, the district court.
Correct.
And then when you get to the Supreme Court, it's not so daunting. But I see some people go, their first experience in the witness box is at the Supreme Court, and you've got to feel sorry for them.
Absolutely. I cut my teeth at the local court. As a uniform, Bobby, you'd read the facts onto the record.
Well, that's right. And we had to remember our statements.
Correct.
Remember that.
Yeah.
And so you'd be sitting at home just parrot fashion.
I did it once. I didn't remember. I didn't learn it.
Yeah.
I wasn't supposed to get on and didn't have time to actually learn it. It was just an embarrassment.
And you never did it again?
Never, ever did it again.
Yeah. So the public understand with going into plain clothes. When we talk plain clothes, that's your first step into becoming a detective. Then you do a course and you get designated.
Correct.
Then we've got the patrol detectives or local detectives, so they're attached to a police station, like in your case it was Redfern. And then you had the major crime squads. When, at what stage of your career did you head towards major crime?
91.
Yeah.
Went to the Untitled Squad South region,
Yep.
which I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
Can I just take you back? I've probably got a funny story. It involves a couple of people. But, you do your D's course, and we did our... so there's two courses, the PCI course.
Yes.
Which is, was it 3 weeks?
It's 3 or 4 weeks.
3 or 4 weeks in the city.
Yeah.
And then we did our D's course in Goulburn.
Yeah.
Because it was pretty new there. And
Right.
we got told to go down there. And I ended up linking up with Adam Purcell, Pete Williams.
Sorry, I just laughed.
Adam
Purcell.
Adam Purcell,
World's funniest man.
He is very, very funny. Adam Purcell, Pete Williams. I knew Pete, I didn't know Adam. And Mark Jones, who I didn't know either.
Yeah.
And Jonesy, who's now, I don't embarrass him, but Jonesy, who's now an assistant commissioner. A very, very good friend of both of ours. As is Adam Purcell.
Yeah.
We, it was a funny course to be involved in, and there was a bit of drinking involved. We ended up opening up our own nightclub in one of the
in Goulburn.
Yeah, in the academy.
Yeah.
In one of the common rooms, which you weren't even supposed to be drinking. The rules were, if you drink, you're out.
Yeah.
We ended up opening a nightclub, 2 barbecues, 2 fridges with all the beer. We'd stack it up You know, after class, you'd stack it up, and you know. And I remember we had the music blaring. It was pretty close to the end of the.
Did
the
your
course.
nightclub have a name?
Yeah, Ziggy's.
Ziggy's
That's
nightclub.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
The only thing I was missing was one of those crystal balls, you know. And we were playing up massively. When I say playing up, music was on, dancing, singing, and barbecue was going. Yeah. And the place was chock-a-block. Right? The club was going really well. We weren't making any money. The club was going really well. And the sergeant who was in charge of the security, poor bugger, he had a gutful.
Why?
I don't know. He come in, it was like the Wild Wild West. The door swung open. He's coming in his pyjamas. He's basically, I've had a gut full of you blokes. You're all going to be sacked, blah blah blah. And he's off, and he pulls the plug on the music, and he's going off at us for about a good 5 minutes, and a voice comes from the back of the club, the room, and he goes,
the smoke-filled nightclub.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you, Sergeant. And he looks up, there's a superintendent, assistant commissioner on the drink with us. And he puts his head down before the doors get swing back, closed behind him. The music was back on there with the barbecue was going on again. It was bloody funny.
I bet you he felt stupid in his pyjamas.
Oh, poor bugger. Yeah. I feel sorry for him. You know, like, we're clearly in the wrong, but we're just having fun, you know. We're all young fellas.
It's funny, isn't it? But
young fellas and girls and guys, you know, it was a great class.
Yeah. But that creates that spirit and that team environment.
Correct.
And I think every detective course that went ahead, someone's got a drinking story or something. I did the detectives course up here in the city, and I just remember some of those nights. But it was intense too, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like the study and that. Like I found that some of the most intense periods of time.
Oh, look.
You'd be drinking, but then you'd have to sober up and spend the rest of the day studying.
Because it was a really hard course. And it was a good course. It was satisfying. Yeah. You know, it's one of the proudest things that I've ever got was that certificate saying you're a detective.
Well, what I liked about it too, what it was that people would fail the course, and I'm not saying that in a nasty sense, but when you got through it, it was something to be proud of.
I was very lucky to get through it, but again,
with your nightclub. How did the nightclub go? Did it?
Well, closed down after we left. We gave all the barbecues back.
I could see you running the nightclub.
No, it wasn't me.
The
just
Italian
me,
stallion.
No, it wasn't just me. No, it was a whole bunch of people. But that was the class, and we had a good mateship going on there.
When you got designated as a detective, did you find that there was a pressure there that you were actually a detective now, like when you were called to jobs? Oh,
yeah, look, absolutely, because you know yourself, you get called to a job, especially on that wireless car, what they call the wireless car A. You know, you're looked at even as a PC constable.
And the wireless car A, when we're referring to that, that's a car that will cover a couple of districts.
Yeah. A district.
Yeah, there'll be
a couple of police stations.
A number of police stations. So a wireless car will be put on the afternoon, have two detectives to cover that whole area. So if any serious crime occurs, you get called to it.
Yeah, that's right. And then you call in the reinforcements down the track. But you get inspectors asking you for advice. And like I've got 3-4 years in the cops, and you got people who've got 30 years in the cops asking you for advice.
Well, that's a responsibility that comes with calling yourself a detective,
correct?
Isn't it? Because you'd get called to a job, and there'd be an experienced officer there, a uniform officer, maybe 20 years experience, but he hands she hands a responsibility over to you because you're a detective.
Yeah, it was good, but it was a lot of pressure. Yeah, you're right. 100% a lot of pressure, and again, you cut your teeth on all that sort of stuff. You're making mistakes.
So going to the stick-ups, hold-up squad in 91?
91.
That would have been wild times.
Oh, it was awesome, mate. Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, you got...
What region were you in?
South region.
South region.
And you were in North?
North region, yeah.
And that's where we got to meet.
Yeah.
Through that and the tactical policing as well. Look, I loved it. You know, the first day in the hold-up squad, I had a bloke by the name of Jack Ferguson.
Yeah. Well known.
Great bloke, great detective sergeant. I was senior sergeant at the time, and there was a job in southwest area. They're going to do a stick-up on Metro, the shopping centre there. Yeah. And he handed me a shotgun. This is like day 2. I said,
I know. I laugh now because we realise how...
I wasn't.
Yeah.
He'd be right. No, but he ended up taking it away from me. But I thought, you're beauty. But, you know, it was exciting because you're dealing with armed offenders. you know, as you know, in those days, there was a bank going off every couple of days. There was an armoured van happening all the time.
And I just don't think the public realise or remember those days. It was the Wild West.
Oh, it was the Wild West. And it was because of heroin.
Yeah.
They're all trying to feed their habit.
Bad guys with balaclavas and shotguns coming
Correct.
into banks and stick-ups.
You know, and that's right. I mean, they'd fire. They were vicious offenders. They'd fire a shot in the bank to let them know that they're there. They didn't give a shit about the cops. They didn't give a shit about the people in the bank. And it was really good to actually arrest them before they were just about to go in, which was always the aim. You know,
that puts a smile on my face just thinking about it.
You used to love it, you know, and a couple of them pissed themselves. You know, they're putting their balaclavas on, racking up their shotgun, ready to go in and rob some poor bugger. And you know, you'd surround them, you know, racking up shotguns in front of their face. And have
bigger guns than they do.
Correct. Yes. And they just literally piss themselves.
Yeah.
And they were the bullies, you know.
Yeah.
And you asked me before about, you know, why did you join the cops? I hated bullies.
Yeah, well, that's a good motive. Yeah.
Absolutely hated bullies. And there's no need for bullies. Yeah. You know, we use that term a lot nowadays. Yeah. But they were bullies, and they terrified people, just normal, innocent people, going about their daily lives, who wanted to live a little life without any dramas, and then they get traumatised by these things. They never get over it.
We have violent crime now, but when you think about it, like if someone came into a bank in the city these days and let off a shotgun with a balaclava and put everyone on the ground and then put some more shots around the area or shot someone, you'd be shocked by it because we're just not used to that anymore. But that was the norm.
At the end of the day, everyone, and like even when you went through a traumatic situation with the cops, you go and have a beer. Yeah. And that was it. There was none of that stuff we've got around them now, which is great, you know, and you need to. Yeah. But, it was exciting times, you know, sitting in the back of vans for 16 hours, you know, in the Dove, which is a van that we used in the tactical sense.
So what, and again, just to explain it, a couple of things. First of all, we're in regions, so the major crime, we had North and South region and Western region or Northwest region. We had the armed hold-up squads, we had homicide squads, organised crime, fraud squads, a number of squads. When we were in major crime in those days, in the early 90s, we were also allowed to be members of the SPSU, which is the State Protection Support Unit, which supplement the teams on the State Protection Group. So that was the black overall, shotguns and firearms and the rest in the bad guys. Yep. And that's what we got to, in the stick-ups, when we're in the stick-ups, that's what we got to work on. So when you say sitting in a Dove, we'd be sitting in a van waiting for a bank to be robbed, and they'd put their balaclavas on and get their guns and start running to the bank, and we'd jump out and put shotguns to them.
Correct.
And that was fun.
If that all worked out.
Yeah. There was pressure, but it was fun. The fun was over once you had done the arrest and nothing had gone wrong, because there was always a potential for something to go wrong.
Absolutely.
But I think when you join the police, I think it's I call it a childhood dream of you want to arrest the bad guys.
Yeah, you want to do the car chases and all that sort of stuff.
And there is nothing worse than someone with a balaclava on and a shotgun going in to rob someone. So.
And killing people like that. They used to kill people quite often, you know, like I remember going to the Gamesman murder.
Just tell us a bit of details on that.
Basically, I think it was 2 or 3, and like my memory doesn't serve me that well, but 2 or 3 crooks, 2 crooks, end up coming into the Gamesman, which is a famous games shop, electronic games back in the day, and they threatened the staff. It was late night shopping. It was pretty close to Christmas, I think. The owner, Angelo, ended up grappling with the gun, and the gun went off and killed him.
Ah, yes, I do remember that one.
Yeah. And that was traumatic, because I had to take the statement off the son, who was 15 years old.
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah.
You know, and he was... I mean, how do you talk to a young kid? I mean, that sticks with me for the rest of my life, you know. Yeah. You know, seeing Dad on the floor, but grabbing this kid and saying, mate, come with me, we'll have a chat. I want to get all that evidence. But you feel so much empathy for this young kid who's just lost his dad, and seeing his dad get murdered in front of him.
That's traumatic, isn't it? Yeah.
And they end up locking up. I had nothing to do with the lockups as such, because I stepped away from the job, but they end up locking the guys up. I think it was Mick Fitzgerald and Mark Jones got involved.
Oh, right.
And
Yeah,
they did a brilliant job locking those two
No,
guys.
that gives you a lot of satisfaction, doesn't it, when you see that? But that's the rawness of what I don't think the public fully appreciate. Like, you don't even want to put your mind there if you were faced with something like that. And that's the violence of the crime and the ramifications, the ripple effect it has.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. You and me have seen some pretty bad stuff.
Yeah.
And you never forget it.
No, it sticks. It sticks with you.
It's one of those ghosts you carry around every time you go to
Yeah.
it. I used to describe it as a ghost.
And if I like to think if you can use it and it becomes experience. You talk about the evidence you give in court, and you see something like that, and it hardens you that little bit more and prepares you for the next one. I remember my first week in stick-ups. It was like something out of the movies. I just thought, this can't be happening. Day 2 of my stint in the stick-ups, we arrested Christopher Binns.
Oh, yeah.
That's Badness, a well-known, or his nickname's Badness.
I remember him.
He's
Good crook.
A baddie. He escaped from prison down in Melbourne, had got a gun smuggled in, stabbed himself in the stomach to go to the prison hospital, had a gun smuggled in, escaped, came up here and started robbing banks up here. The stick-ups down there in Victoria wanted him badly, and we got him, and it was he robbed a bank in Chatswood, and then we got him the next day, and it was cars being rammed, shotguns, that type of stuff. He went into Parramatta Jail, and then he escaped. I think it was Julie Cashman.
Yeah, correct.
Helped him escape from Parramatta Jail. And I think he was in the shootout out with Jockey Smith, where
That's right.
Jockey Smith was killed.
Yeah.
He was a lunatic.
He was a lunatic.
And that was my first week in stick-ups, locking up him. And I remember dealing with him and all that. And I just thought, this is a real deal. So that was going to major crime. And I thought,
100%.
okay, well, this is where it starts and finishes.
The rubber meets the road there, And it was, look, the whole-up squad used to get a really bad rap, and
Yeah.
they were all corrupt.
Yeah.
And it was only because of one bloke.
Yeah.
Roger Rogerson.
Yeah.
And we all got tainted the fact that we're all corrupt, we're all copping money.
Yeah.
We're all stealing, thieving, lying. Just absolutely terrible stuff that I used to think of you.
Yeah.
But I still loved, and I'm still proud of the fact
Yeah.
that I worked in the Untitled squad.
Yeah, well, I say that too, and people, and certainly at the time, and when the Royal Commission came through, and all the inquiries, and people within the armed hold-up squad were caught, with doing bad things, and it was almost shameful that it was you worked in the armed hold-up squad. But I'm the same way, Ange. I think we did a lot of good, and it needed to be hard people for hard times.
Correct.
And the Roger Rogerson stigma, I'd be in the witness box and getting asked questions in the witness box about Roger Rogerson. And it'd start along the lines of, so you're in the stick-ups, you're one of the tough guys, you bash them, you load them, and you put them away. And Roger Rogerson's your hero. These are the questions I've been asked in the witness box. It was strange times.
You know what? I've heard Roger Rogerson talk, and I had nothing but disdain for the fella, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I've heard him talk, about the whole-up squad and the shooting that he was involved in at Danga Place and what have you, and just nothing but disdain for the bloke.
Yeah.
Shooting somebody is nothing to be proud of.
No, it's not something that you should carry around as a badge.
It's not a badge.
Yeah. So the stick-ups, interesting times, great area.
Great
I think it's something that I think we're lucky that we had the experience.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
work in the stick-ups.
There's probably a couple of stories, but
You've got 1,000 stories.
I know, but there's one story, and I said it during my send-off because it's when family becomes involved in the jobs. And at the time, I was living in Hillsdale, which is near Pagewood, near the shopping centre, East Gardens there, and just had, I think, I've had 2 girls by then. And we were living in a semi-detachable house, 2-bedroom house. And we were following Blackmore, and Peter Reshman was running the job. And he was a great detective sergeant.
Good reputation.
Great reputation. Hard as nails. And end up getting onto a professional group, which is very rarely you get onto a professional group. I mean, Binzer would be one of them. Professional arm robbers. That's all they did. stuff you see in movies like
Yeah.
Heat and all
Yeah,
that sort of
yeah.
stuff. And these guys would meet in Sydney. They'd come from different parts of Australia and meet to do a stick up. And what they were planning to do was to do I think it was about $2 or $3 million van job.
Yeah, yeah. Armoured van.
Armoured van,
yeah.
which is massive money
Yeah,
back
yeah.
in the day. They were armed up to the hilt.
Yeah.
There was talk they had 50 caliber gun on the back of a ute.
Yep.
Which is similar to the one they shootout they had in Melbourne.
That's getting pretty serious.
Yeah. And so we're following these guys for about 6 months. They come together, follow a van,
Yep.
and they'd peel off. They'd be doing dry runs and trying to work out their strategy. So they put some time into it. They didn't just roar into a bank going.
No,
"Let's make
and I think the way you're describing them, and you reference the movie Heat, but they were crews that operated that way.
Yeah.
They were that serious about.
good
They were
crews.
professional armed robbers.
Correct.
That's what they did, and I don't want to give them respect because they're bad guys, but begrudgingly, the way they operated, some of it was some
a little bit of
pretty
respect,
slick moves.
Correct.
Yeah,
I get where
yeah.
you're coming from, and I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
So ended up following around, and they went to, we got information that they were, and we had some electronics in
Yeah.
place, but we never got a lot out of them because they were pretty good crews, and they didn't talk that much over the phones, even back in those days. And they end up going to East Gardens.
Yeah.
And they were looking at doing a van at East Gardens, but
Yeah.
we weren't 100% sure.
East
they were going-
Gardens, the shopping village.
Yeah, correct.
Yep.
There was a van going in there to deliver money.
Yeah.
It was about $200,000. That was going to be their in-between job, so they can actually fund the next step, which is going to be the big job.
Yeah.
And they're all good crooks, really, really good crooks. Unbeknownst, we didn't know they were actually going to do the stick-up. They were but we were prepared for it just in case. We thought they were going to do a dry run. But so, because we lived around the corner,
Yeah.
not very far from that, we set that up as our command post. So I rang
Your
my
house.
wife. Yeah, I rang
Yeah,
my wife
yeah.
up and said, look, it was like 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Going to come around with a couple of guys, honey. It won't get in your way. And next minute there was 20 guys, all dressed in black. Shotguns being racked at the front yard. Neighbours are coming out, trying to work out what was going on. And I actually had Roy Fergo, who was a really good crook back in the day.
Yeah.
He lived about three houses down. He thought we were going to raid his
He
house.
thought he was gone.
Helicopters over the top. Margot's in a dressing gown trying to serve coffee to all these guys in blacks and that.
Yeah.
Anyway, they arrived. We all roared out, and they end up. SPG guys come out of the Dove,
Yep.
the truck,
Yep.
and there was confrontation. They end up firing rounds. Our guys started to end up firing rounds.
Yeah.
Luckily, everyone missed, but there was old ladies walking through them. There was an old lady who was walking through at the time. Heard a bullet whiz past the head,
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
could have easily gone to shit.
Yeah, yeah.
We ended up arresting him, and that was a very satisfying job. But it was like tense. They were determined to get away,
Yeah,
so they'd
yeah.
fire rounds. Security guards from the van were firing rounds,
Yeah, yeah.
but we ended up locking them up and jamming up in the car.
Yeah,
you
the
know.
adrenaline's rushing and all that, but
Yeah.
the consequences, as you're
It's
saying,
so
it
much.
just misses by a couple of
Correct.
centimetres
Correct.
from hitting.
We had a
the
lot of
lady.
rounds flying
Yeah,
in
yeah,
this car park
yeah.
of the shopping centre,
Yeah.
and it wasn't out of behest. We
Yeah,
certainly didn't want to do that. But like you talk about the TAU day, sorry, the tactical days.
Yeah, yeah,
Probably the funnest job I ever did was doing a head-on car stop.
yeah. Ram.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, yeah.
They're just fun. I mean, you've done
I always got nervous when I was told you're going to ram the car. I don't know. It's something in me. I didn't want to smash the car up.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you're sitting
correct.
there. And,
It's a nice car.
Now, if you see that car, you're going to ram. Okay, yeah, I'm going to deliberately crash the car. It always made me nervous.
The
to be
crooks'
honest.
eyes were as big as saucers
Yeah,
when you're coming
yeah,
towards them,
yeah,
but they were
yeah.
fun.
There was a time that when there was an overlap where we were in the major crime squad, and I think we were at Homicide when they combined. I'm jumping forward a little bit here, where they've combined all the regions and we're in Homicide, and we still had we were still SPSU, and you're Homicide, and you're on call, and the phone could ring. And I would pray it would be a tactical job rather than a homicide job.
Correct.
Because with a tactical job, you get called out, you get to dress up in your overalls, put a shotgun on and arrest a bad guy.
Correct.
And then, or in homicide, you could be away for months.
That's right.
Yeah, and it was always so much. It was a good counterbalance to the homicide work. You could go out, get the excitement of the arrest, And there was the pressure, but the excitement of the arrest, but then just walk away from
Correct.
it.
It was done and dusted.
And hand it over to the detectives.
Correct.
It was a good feeling, wasn't it?
Yeah,
you
it was
just had to
unreal.
go get changed.
Yeah. No,
so, your family would have been impressed having the 20. Did your weights go up with your daughters?
Oh no, well they were only just young. They were babies at the
Right,
time.
right,
You know, they didn't understand. Like my oldest Jessie, she always used to describe me as a taxi driver who wears blacks and carries a gun. She didn't understand I was a detective. She couldn't actually say I was a detective.
Yeah.
So she went to kindergarten. It was time to talk about what your parents do. And she got up and says, "Oh, your dad's a taxi driver and he wears blacks and a gun."
You try to shield your kids from things, and I know
Absolutely.
now that my kids are older that they would talk, and if you're on call, you had to take home a bag of guns, and you'd have the rifles and shotguns and all that. And I thought I had them hidden really well. And Jake, as he got older, has said, "Oh yeah, and you used to think you were hiding all your guns, where you've got them tucked away." But it's funny what they perceive and.
Oh, absolutely, and when they get older, you wear the gun in, the boyfriends will be there, and.
Well, now there was another, and I reference your send-off, but there was a story that just cracked me up. Some police found your daughter, or stopped your daughter.
Yeah, look, that was, jumping quite a few years into the future, but my second eldest, Ellen, she had a P plates. She asked to borrow a car. I'm going to stay overnight at a friend's place in Parramatta. Yeah, no worries, just be careful, make sure you stay there, blah, blah, blah. The rules that apply. And about 2 hours later, I get this phone call from one of my mates that I used to work with, or worked with at Middle Eastern. So at Middle Eastern Organised Crime, you had three components. You had detectives, you had what they call a tag unit, which was basically plainclothes cops, young plainclothes cops, chasing that middle level crook. Then you had the uniform staff who would do the overt, and they were unreal. And in that you had a whole patrol. And one of the boys rings me up and says, "Oh, Angie, have you got a car that's a silver blah blah blah?" I'm going, yeah, that's our car. It's got a P plate on it. I'm going, "Oh yeah, where are you?" She goes, he was a sergeant. He goes, "Oh, we're in Marrickville."
That's not.
I've gone, really? So he said, "What do you want us to do?" I said, "Pull her over."
So this is your daughter's car?
Yeah, correct.
Or your car?
My car.
Daughter driving, supposedly going to Parramatta.
And he comes back to me and goes, he's with a mate and another girl, and they're taking a drive, and she's really nervous. "What do you want us to do?" I said, "Get her out of the car and go through the car." And then say, "Your dad says hi," and get back to Parramatta. So my cred went out massively, thinking that,
You've got...
I'm like almost godly powers there.
You've got spies.
Spies everywhere. I've got to go under surveillance.
New South Wales Police.
And a bloke who's got all girls.
Right,
it's massive.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good tool.
Yeah,
that's a very good tool to use.
A couple of years later, I end up getting the threats from Bass and Hampson. We had our police cars patrolling the street quite a lot. And that was another tool, right?
Yeah.
So what are they there for? Oh, they're keeping an eye on you.
They're looking at you.
Correct. So no parties while I'm gone. There's going to be police cars patrolling up and down, which is quite the opposite. But
poor daughters.
Used a bit of... they come out pretty good, thank God, despite me.
Yeah.
My wife did a pretty good job with them. I did a fantastic job.
No, it's funny the overlap between your private life and your professional life, and you try to keep it separate, but there is an overlap because you live it and breathe it, so it's going to fall into your family. So with the stick ups, how many years were you?
I did 6 years there.
6 years.
Yeah,
and then
loved it.
Yeah, where'd you go from there?
Well, Ian Kennedy
got
me to go to Homicide.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
That's a pretty good reference. He was a great bloke, and obviously come with a lot of credit himself. Yeah,
I actually didn't want to go.
Yeah,
I wanted to stay in the hold-up squad because
you're
like a kid there, really.
Yeah,
you're chasing bad guys. Homicide seemed a little bit too serious for me. A lot of work as well. But you got me transferred there unbeknownst to me. So I was actually transferred to there. I just found myself in Homicide. He rings me up and says, "You're in Homicide now." I'm going, okay. But he was great. Great.
Yeah.
And I was doing a job, murder investigation, assisting on a murder investigation because they had a robbery component to it, which they used to do back in the day. So it only made sense that I'd move on to homicide.
Yeah. And was that when we're still in the regions? Or?
Yeah,
right,
in the South
okay.
region, yeah. So that was 97.
Right, okay. When did we form, when did they all combine? That was...
Oh, that's a bloody good question, mate.
98, 99?
I think it's something like 98,
Because we were there...
98, 99, you're correct.
We were certainly together over the Olympics.
Correct.
Yeah. Did you do tactical policing in the Olympics?
No, I did close personal. That was another. I did close personal protection.
Why we always laugh when we talk about that? That was pretty good times.
Great job.
Yeah.
Best fun I've ever had in the cops.
Remember, we had the options of doing tactical, or you could do close personal protection. Now, close personal protection, you had two options. You could do the athletes at the Olympics, or you could do the dignitaries. And
what'd you do?
I did the dignitaries.
I did the athletes, and they were fantastic.
Yeah, but there's some of your stories you can't talk about on here.
But it was so much fun.
That was yeah.
You did, like you were dealing with the top athletes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we looked after the US and the Israeli teams.
Yeah.
And obviously the US are a bit more, had some really big names, and I like talking about the names, but we looked after the US basketball team. Yeah. And I remember me and Pete Williams.
So again, just to explain this, because it sounds like we're just making this up, but with close personal protection for the 2000 Sydney Olympics, they needed people to, basically be the bodyguards to the athletes and the dignitaries, and you were doing the athletes. So you got the run of the Olympic Village.
Pretty much.
The run of any events.
Yep.
And we had.
You had to be guided by what teams and what risk there was.
You had work to do.
Yeah.
But you also had that pass that got you in anywhere that
Correct.
you wanted to go. So
you'd always be with an athlete.
Yeah.
So you got to talk to some of these athletes, these world-class
athletes.
So
which athletes were you?
Marion Jones, who was later on... Yeah, she was later disgraced by using
but
drugs.
She was about the highest profle
She
athlete.
was a beautiful lady.
Yeah. Treated you well?
She was fantastic.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
She had a husband there. I can't remember his name. He was going through dramas at the time.
Well, was he a weightlifter or something?
Yeah.
He was big
fella. And had a massive distrust for the cops.
Yeah.
And obviously got the divides probably still going off in the US. But we end up winning him over, as Australians do.
Yeah.
But like the US basketball team, which was worth $1 million.
Who'd they? I saw the final. Like I was sitting in the front row for the final. Yeah, I was looking after, I think, the Turkish or the head of state for Turkey for that one. But it was.
We were on court.
Yeah.
So right next to us was the interchange.
Yeah.
And we were right on court.
And that was, I'm not a basketball fan, but it was, you knew that it was Shark O'Neal and that type of stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't remember the names of them, but there was some big names amongst them. And then to watch them, they played Russia in front of us.
Yeah.
And just their athleticism was unbelievable.
Yeah. But what a great experience. Like you sign up to be a cop. And there we were at the closing ceremony at the Olympics, the formal ceremony. I was at the formal ceremony, walking around seeing the who's who of the athletic world, but then world dignitaries and all that, just walking around in the cocktail party.
Yeah.
I
didn't get to the cocktail parties, we're a bit more down to earth.
You were doing the athletes.
But look, that was great, but the Paralympics was probably more special to me.
Yeah.
Because, those people have...
Oh, yeah. So you stayed on for that?
We stayed on for that for the US teams, and they were fantastic.
Yeah,
we end up playing, challenging the US volleyball team, sitting volleyball team.
Yeah.
And these guys were veterans who'd lost their legs, some through sickness, some through bombs and IEDs and all that
So
sort of stuff.
the police security or the...
We challenged them.
Yeah.
And the bet was if we lost, which is always going to be happening, if we lost, we would give them a carton of beer.
Yeah.
And if they lost, the coach had to give us his leg.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And he was
high stakes.
You want my leg? Yep, your leg. That's a bet. Yeah. And they sort of eventually get our humour. And we end up getting some of the Australian players onto our team, so we still lost. But it was just a lot of fun, and looking after some of it was very humbling to look after some of these people. The basketball team were again, they were great. Yeah. I remember meeting them. They just jumped off the bus, and a couple of them were standing.
Yeah.
And most of them were in wheelchairs. And I said, "Oh, you guys in the standing up." and this might sound cruel.
Yeah, yeah.
But it wasn't. It was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
to break the ice. I mean, I thought this is Paralympics. You can't
Yeah.
be sitting. You can't be standing up there
Yeah,
going,
yeah.
"Oh, really? Should I get my seat?" Obviously they were on false legs
Yeah,
and what
yeah,
have you, but
yeah.
they were just, eventually they got our humour as well.
But you mentioned that, the Australian humour, and I
Yeah.
think that's the Olympics had a positive feel about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And when you were like looking after prime ministers, heads of state, and all that, and everyone was very serious, but you could break it down with Australian
Correct.
humour. I remember I had the president of Bulgaria, very serious dude, and then he had his generals looking after him and all that, and they were just staring at me to start with and going, "Who the hell is this person?" But by the end of it, they'd warmed to.
Yeah, that's right.
We could have a laugh, and their frustration was that they weren't allowed to carry guns. And,
Yeah.
they wanted to carry guns in, and he had a personal bodyguard that was about 6'6". He was a giant. And he said he's come up to me and said, "Who's looking after my president?" My president, like that's how close he was affiliated with him. I said, "I am," and he's looking up, and I'm looking up, and I just So for days and days, I had to prove myself to him, and eventually I won him over. But
Throw a couple on him, or
I could have taken him in.
no, there's no doubt, mate. You're a
I
good
had
fighter.
a gun. He didn't have a gun. But it was fun times.
Yeah,
wasn't
it was unreal.
I look back at my career, and I won't say it was the hardest or most rewarding, but I would definitely say it was one of the fun times of the career, the Sydney
100%,
Olympics.
yeah.
And
Like for me, it was the Paralympics was the most rewarding.
yeah.
It was fantastic. We ended up going for drinks with them afterwards.
Yeah.
They're just such good people, and they've been through adversity, which I respect.
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
get up, pull themselves up, and
Yeah,
they're in the Olympics.
Amazing.
They're amazing. Yeah.
I signed up for that. They gave you an option, and I ended up getting pulled off that. We got taken on a job. A job came in. I got taken off, so I was disappointed I missed the Paralympics. But all right, that's the fun part. Then we move into homicide.
Yeah.
So in any homicide detective, there's certain jobs that have left an impression, or you think about. And it's not rating one worse than the other, because if someone dies, they're all bad. But is there one crime that sort of sticks with you, or for whatever reason?
There's a few. I mean, Paul Michael Offer.
Yep.
We end up working at Cogra on another job, and there was a call come over the radio, local police radio, that there was a shooting murder at Cogra. A bit further down, Cogra. So we actually rang up the office and said, "Look, there's a murder there. We're here. Can we go over there and just give them a hand for the day?" So what we ended up finding out was Ronald Mills answered the door and got shot in the head with a 9mm Luger. And he was at the front door. We find this out down the track, but he's there with a bullet hole in his head. Run-of-the-mill sort of guy.
Yeah.
He was a marine engineer of some sort.
Yeah.
Lived in just a normal house in suburbia. And it was a real quandary to us why somebody would shoot this person in the head.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's a statement type crime.
It is, isn't it?
Answering the door and
It
shot
is.
in the head.
It's one of those ones you sort of generally leave to the more sophisticated, not sophisticated, the organised crime type murders.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we did some work on it, and ended up linking it to an attempt murder in St Ives.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work in between, obviously. A lady got shot in the head with a crossbow some 6 months earlier. And there's a lot of reasons why we linked it. She got shot in it. She answered the door again.
Yeah.
And as she answered it, a guy in a balaclava shot her through the head, through the skull. The arrow went through her brain, and she ended up collapsing, obviously.
Yeah.
She survived that, but obviously with massive problems. The husband found her, and
So how far apart were these
they were
guys?
about 6 months. We never went to that one. We found out about that one. Husband got targeted for that.
Yeah.
By the local cops, and I understand that totally, and that's sometimes we have to do that,
You got to look.
You got to look at the, generally
people close.
as you do, and sometimes that's a bad part of our job.
Yeah.
But we have to do it.
Yeah.
You can't take anything for granted. You know?
And when you say that's a bad part, and we'll get back to the story on those particular crimes, but the bad part is that as a homicide detective, you can't. Yeah, there's something tragic that's happened, but the people close to the victim, you've got to look at them as well.
You've got to.
And if you don't, you're not doing your job.
Correct.
So yeah,
and that is the hard part because you've got empathy for them as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes it's not going to be the case, but you treat them as suspects.
And you've got to put them through the hoops.
You've got to put them through the hoops.
Yeah.
Because there's been times when police haven't done that.
Yeah.
And you're left with nothing.
Yeah.
And you know it's them.
Yeah.
And you know yourself, the stats tell you that it's a pretty high percentage.
It's the offender is known to the victim.
Correct.
Anyway, getting back to these two crimes, so a shooting and...
Yeah, so they targeted the husband. Mayher Gerges was the lady who got shot in the head, and we ended up linking them together. And what it was, we eventually found out, both Ronald Mills and the husband of Mayher, George Gerges, were both giving evidence in a fraud trial against Paul Offer. And we knew it was Paul Offer before we even knew about this stuff, because yourself, you're trying to gather as much information. We found a phone call, and I'm jumping back and forth, but we end up going back on the call charge records on the the second victim, Ronald Mills.
Yeah.
And found a call, very, very short call, on his CCRs that came from call charge records from Queensland, a caravan park.
Right.
And we end up obviously getting this Paul Offer's name, and we looked at who was staying at the park, and boom, Paul Offer. So we end up going to Queensland, Belinda, Neil and I.
Yeah.
She was a great detective.
Yeah, she was good.
We both went up there with John Thompson, who was the local detective sergeant at Cogra, going up to Queensland, and basically we found out later on, or we surmised afterwards, that all he was doing is checking up on the fact that he killed him.
Yeah.
So we go up there, we actually tail him for a while. We haven't got enough evidence to charge him.
So tailing him, you're doing surveillance on him and see what he's up to.
That's a bad word, but surveilling him with the use of Queensland Surveillance Unit. End up linking up with a mate of mine, Steve Hollahand. I don't know if you know Steve. He's a superintendent now.
He was the boss of Homicide up there.
Eventually. But he was at the time, he was a sergeant at the Holop School, which we made mates, the networking that you do.
Remember we got in trouble because we were late drinking at the casino?
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't go
because
to the detective service?
That
was him.
Yeah,
that was right. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's another.
We got in trouble by the bosses.
So I ended up linking up with Steve and asking him for a favour, and if he could put a surveillance team on this bloke, which he did.
Yeah.
He's unreal. We had nothing apart from this one phone call.
Yep.
A bit of circumstantial evidence, but we didn't have him in Sydney. We ended up doing our homework, and we ended up getting a bit more. We ended up pulling this bloke over, Paul Offer, near the Story Bridge, I think it was, in Brisbane, in his motorhome.
Yeah.
He's cool as a cucumber. He gets pulled over by New South Wales cops and Queensland cops. Cool as a cucumber.
Yeah.
And he edges towards the rear of the motorhome, and we kept on pushing him back, not knowing what he was doing. We take him back to the Roma Street police station, which was their headquarters, and interview him. We got nothing out of him. No, I wasn't in Sydney. I was up here with my family. Interviewed his wife. No, he was up here with us. Just gave us a story. Didn't have enough to hold him, but we had enough to hold his vehicle because we were going to do a search. It was going to be forensic.
Yep.
Because, you don't expect the murder weapon to be there.
Yeah.
You're sort of hoping for one little bit of evidence we can tie him up. So we let him go because we had nothing. We searched that vehicle with forensics up there who did an amazing job, Queensland Forensics. Searched that vehicle for 2 days and ended up finding a Luger.
Really?
Which is like beautiful. We got him. Matched the gun to the shooting of Ronald Mills.
Yeah.
Also find some arrows, pretty similar to the ones that Nag was shot, and a killing kit. So balaclava, garrote, and a couple of little other things that he had in there. Now we're looking back and going, why was he edging towards the side of the car? It was to get his gun.
Right, okay.
And have it out with the cops.
Yeah.
And we did know.
Yeah. Well, you got
It's all about control.
Yeah,
you know?
it's funny, and you think people are overcautious or police are overcautious, but you got that because you do not know if you're pulling over someone.
You can't be too trusting.
What they've got. What was his background?
Well, Paul was, as much as we could come from Ireland, and we had information, and we can never verify it, obviously, but he had information. It was an IRA bomber.
Right.
He'd done some bombings over there, and he actually skirted about it to some of his mates in jail down the track.
Yeah, because the way you described the crime, it just seemed fairly callous, and there must have been a history to it. You don't just...
When we caught up with him and arrested him, he gave surveillance because he could feel the net closing on him. He gave surveillance the slip and went on the run. So it was a mad panic manhunt in Brisbane, somewhere we don't know. The Queensland cops were fantastic. He ended up stabbing his dog and killing his German Shepherd, his family pet. This is the sort of person he is.
What was that?
Just so he can get rid of the dog and it's less of a burden to him. That's the sort of person. He was very narcissistic. He was a real psycho. And we use that word a lot in the cops. He was a psychopath. Yeah. So whatever he needed, he'd get things. If he needed to kill somebody, then he would. Yeah. He basically, we end up finding out he was trying to buy a boat. Yeah. From a couple up in Queensland, in Southport, and basically he was going to kill him. Yeah. He was promising $300,000 that the boat was selling for. Right. And he brought a kit, and he was going to kill him.
Take us for a test run.
So so he was the next victim. So he just, to kill somebody over a fraud matter, it was a shitty. Well,
that's where that crime. Yeah, it doesn't add up. So I think you're probably right with calling him a psychopath. Yeah. But stopping someone like that gives some satisfaction.
It did. And then he eventually made... we got him in... He's one of those guys, the sort of guys you get, the people you arrest, they never stop. Yeah. So in jail, he gets a group of his mates in jail and starts coming up with a plan that will set up the cops. So, Angelo Memmolo and John Thompson were selling heroin. This is the story they concocted. And whoever kills both Angelo Memmolo and John Thompson, I'll give him $20,000. $20,000 he never had. Yeah. Luckily for us, one of the crooks, he was as honest as you can be. He was an armed robber, believe it or not. Yeah. He ended up getting in contact with us from jail and says, this is a plan. And we end up bugging his thing. We end up charging him with solicitor murder.
Oh, so he was...
he was fair income. Yeah, he was fair income. Yeah. So, he was just an absolute psychopath. And then he made allegations against me that I knocked off $100,000. He didn't have a cent to his name.
You did have that good suit at one stage. We wondered where
$150 suit.
We wondered where you got the money for that.
Yeah, right.
But, you have people like that I know I've got people that are sitting in the cells now that their whole day is planned about how to get back at you.
Yeah, absolutely,
mate.
I mean, you've upset enough people. I mean, you know that.
I'm talking about the police, not the prisoners.
Sorry. But, you've upset enough people by locking up, and people don't like you. You're the face of whatever they've done. And
well, that's right. You're to blame for the fact that I got caught for killing these people. You mentioned the old crook came forward. You see, there is some, and I don't want to give crooks credit, but sometimes credit where credit's due. Some of those old style crooks, they had a code, didn't they? They had a code where it would have almost been, look, I'll do armed hold-ups and that, but no one's going to get hurt. But I don't want a cop killed or a cop's family killed or that type of thing. So
in fact, he wasn't an older guy. He was quite a young fella, but he had those, he had some problems with drugs down the track, and he ended up getting charged. And, he kept in contact with me. He ended up moving to South Australia. He had some issues there a couple of times. Yeah. Trying to get his life into, in some sort of balance and order. And tried to stop reoffending. I ended up having this, people latch onto you.
Well, informants, and we've all had informants, and you get that close connection, and it's human nature, I think. If you spend time enough, or you've been in a certain set of circumstances, you get that connection. But
you don't want to use them up and drop them, and use them up and then go, well, mate, you discarded now.
I think that's the worst thing cops can do. And when I speak to cops, if we're training young detectives or whatever, if you make a false promise or burn an informant,
never do that.
you've lost that person forever, and that's going to permeate through the thing. And if you choose your words, you don't make false promises.
No,
if
no.
I'm dealing with an informant, I say, okay, this is what I can and can't do. I'm not going to cross the line, because it's a test of wills quite often.
Yeah, look, absolutely, and they always want something from you.
Yeah, yeah.
I've had heaps of informants through the Middle Eastern, particularly.
Yeah, yeah.
You just say, look, if you fuck up,
Yeah.
I'm going to lock you up. I'll be the first person to knock on your door.
Yeah.
I will lock you up.
Yeah.
So don't. Okay, I'm not giving you a green light. I'm not giving you any of that sort of stuff, and they actually respect it.
Yeah, yeah. You got to hold that strong moral compass,
Yeah.
and don't cross the lines. But yeah, the relationship between us informants is quite funny, and I know I've got informants that if their relationship goes wrong, it's my fault. Yeah, like,
That's it.
and it's
Why is it my fault? Yeah.
It's almost like you're their parent, how you raise them. I'm sorry, but that's the bond. And I've got informants now that I've been in contact with for over 20 years. And,
Mate, we had some like really good informants, like
So-
bad crooks, bad Middle Eastern crooks, like tough guys,
yeah.
crying.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I
Mr.
want
Mr. Angelo, like I've done so wrong.
All right, so the time in the stick-ups, and you've gone to homicide, but a big part of your career has been, and what you're well known for within the cops, is you work with the Middle Eastern crime.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah. I came, so basically in between that part of the homicide, I went to uniform. I got promoted to a duty officer's job in St George.
Yeah. Just on that, before we get to the Middle Eastern, how did it feel going from being a detective all that time and then back into uniform?
Well, it was 20 years since I wore the uniform. And
Yeah.
Back in uniform. It was unusual. You'd be sitting in a car,
Yeah.
obviously marked car, and you're thinking, why is everyone slowing down? And you just couldn't realise everyone's looking at you. Going,
Yeah.
why is everyone looking at you? You stand at the set of lights in full uniform. You forget that you got a uniform on, and you think about crossing the road when there's no cars there, but against the lights, and you go,
And it
I
happened
can't
to a
do that.
lot of detectives whether they were promoted from senior constable to a sergeant
Yeah.
in a uniform position, or a sergeant into a inspector's position, which is the duty officer's position back at the LAC,
Yeah.
and wearing a uniform for the first time in
Yeah.
20 years. It's confronting.
It is. It was really confronting. I had to relearn a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It made me appreciate what the first responders are still doing. The
Yeah.
young fellas who are getting out there. They're actually, there's some really, really good young people out there who just want to be first responders.
Yeah.
When we talk about detectives, we're the higher echelon, which is rubbish, obviously.
Yeah.
But these guys are in and out, going to work, and it actually renewed my faith in the cops to
Yeah.
a certain degree.
It was. I had the same experience. I didn't go as a duty officer, but a crime manager,
Yeah.
and back in the uniform. Although I only wore it once.
Did you? I never had that opportunity, I wish.
A little bit more flexibility as a crime manager, but getting back attached to it after years and years of specialist major crime work,
correct.
you realised how narrow your skill set was.
Correct.
On that you were very focused on that, and it was I did 3 years back in as a crime manager, and I look back at those times fondly too, because it
Same time.
upskilled me.
Yeah.
It made me realise that I'd lost certain skills, and gave me the respect of the uniform, the first responders.
Yeah, look, 100%, you're spot on. There's some, there is a lot of great people doing a lot of work, around the domestic violence type stuff.
Yeah.
Responding just to the daily calls by the public, sitting at the counter, receiving those complaints and doing something about it and trying to help people. They're actually fantastic people that are doing it,
Yeah.
I really enjoyed my time there, working under a really good superintendent, Paul Carey, who was there. Was just a fantastic guy and knew his stuff back to front.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of respect for that man. I've worked, and you probably heard it during my send off, but I don't think I've ever worked under a bad boss.
Yeah.
All my bosses have been fantastic, and Paul I hold in high regard. During that time in uniform, You do the night works and stuff. That got really hard to get used to. Just doing the night works again. But you get some interesting jobs out of that. And one that sticks in my mind, I'll never forget, was I got called to a block of flats. It was massive unit complex in Rockdale. Uniform car called me down. They having dramas trying to access a unit. There was concern for welfare. Can you come down? I thought, that's just a bit of a nothing job, but I'll go down and give them a hand. It was like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
So we go down there, and two really good young cops, a female probationary constable only in the job for 3 or 4 months, and a guy had been in for the job a year and a half. You talk about us. We were lucky back in our day. It's different, but we were lucky in our day to have some really senior cops to teach us.
Yeah. There was a like an apprenticeship that you served.
Correct. These guys are learning off each other as they go along. There's not that depth that we used to have. So I rock up there and end up getting more of the story. Husband of a family who lived in that particular unit had been caught up with something, and they're only just getting the information, but he had serious concerns for the welfare of his family inside the unit. There may be an intruder. So we do some knocking around and find out that the lights have been turned off in that unit. They can't be raised. We end up, me and this other young fellow, getting the fireys, getting up a ladder and climbing in through a kitchen window on the first floor, I think it was.
Yeah.
Climbing through the window in total darkness. You do that flashlight thing with the firearm out, because we were concerned that they were being held hostage. And it wasn't enough to call the tactical cops. Yeah. It wasn't enough to call for help.
They're the awkward ones.
They're really hard.
Yeah.
So I made a decision, rightly or wrong, to go in. Before that, I noticed the window had been broken in the unit in a circular shape, which was really unusual. And you couldn't make it out, but there was something like through the blind was in that circular shape as well. So lights are on, flashlights are on, and flashing them on and off so you don't give away position, blah, blah, blah. And round the corner, and there's a long hallway. It's a pretty big unit, long hallway. Flash my light, and I see this young 15-year-old kid holding a tennis racket. Startled me.
Not what you expect.
And he's on the chair, leaning back on two of the rear legs of the seat. And he's got a bullet hole to his head.
All right.
So inch closer towards him. And I tell the young fellow, I've got a dead person in front of us. Next bedroom, there's a lady who'd been shot in the head.
Yeah.
Check for her pulse. She's dead. Another one, and then we move on and find another one. Another female, young female, that was mum. Another female had been the daughter, had been suffocated. And that'll never ever leave me. That image of, I've got it firmly entrenched in my head, and think about it quite often. Go out to the door and tell the uniforms, I've got 3 people dead in here. Young probation constable, she's startled by it. She goes, bullshit. Yeah. And I'm Inspector of Police. She's talking to probationary constable things. She's a great chick. She goes, bullshit. I've gone, I'm fair dinkum. Because we used to play tricks on each other and, try to be a bit jovial. And I'm going, I'm fair dinkum. She goes, no, that's rubbish. You're having a crack at me. I'm going, I'm fair dinkum. The other young fella comes out and says, no, it's fair dinkum. You can see the shock on her face. Yeah. Because she was minding the front door in case.
Well, it's something that you're not going to expect.
No.
Is it?
No.
Like, you prepare for it, but you don't really expect it. So a concern for welfare, and all police have done it, where you've gone into a house, but you've actually gone into a house and found the very thing that you were concerned about.
And look, we talk about stuff we've seen, you never get to unsee it, and things we've experienced, you never get to unsee it. But, it's really good to see the cops now, looking after their people mentally. Yeah. And I don't want to get on that bandwagon, but you do see stuff, and it does affect you. There's no doubt about it. You go home and you check on your kids. I go to a baby murder, I'd go home
Yeah.
and make sure the kids are all right.
Yeah.
You know, that lives with you all the time. So, yeah, we are tough to a certain degree, but, you know...
We had those, when they combined the squads, we had those spate of baby deaths, and remember where we had to do all baby deaths?
Yep.
And there was people in the homicide squad getting burnt out because we just did one baby death after the other. And what I mean by do all baby deaths, in homicide, when we have jobs, we can choose whether the locals are capable of running it,
Yeah.
or whether we need to come in and use our specialist skills. But there was a decision made that any baby or child that was killed, that we were going to run the jobs. So
absolutely, mate.
we ended up getting...
It was a shit go to.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you go to, you know, one where mum had gone to answer the phone, left the baby in the bathtub, baby slipped under and drowned.
Yeah, yeah,
And you walk into this house that's totally destroyed
yeah.
by the fact. And we're there's
And
homicide.
you've got to invest. Yeah,
You gotta
and
investigate it, you know.
and it was hard to hide the fact that you're from homicide, and the
Correct.
family are looking at you, and that it's quite often just tragedies. And
It was just a tragedy.
yeah, but we got a lot of those. So that one where we have found the bodies.
What actually had happened, I never investigated because I
Yeah.
was in uniform and duty officer, but
Yeah.
one of the boys, Joe Marie, he's a great investigator. He investigated, found out that
Joe
Dad...
did the one at North Epping, didn't he?
Correct.
The family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it, but
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
just a great investigator. He ended up taking it over, obviously, and running it. And I don't know the ins and outs, but basically believed Dad was having an affair with a security guard.
Right.
The security guard tried to hold it over him and tried to extort money, kidnapped him, tied him down, and went back and killed the family.
Right.
As a result, just a waste.
It is a waste quite
Yeah.
often. It's just senseless.
Yeah, it is.
The motives for.
And that's what you can't
for
get your
murder.
hair around sometimes, is that
Yeah.
it's how senseless
Yeah.
a lot of the murders are.
Yeah.
You go to.
But the image of you crawling through the window and then flashing your lights on and off, and then coming in confronted with a 15-year-old in a chair holding a tennis racket, like
He was trying to defend himself.
how sort of obscure, and that I can imagine hanging on to that that image. If you enjoyed part 1, make sure you listen to part 2. Ange will continue on his journey in major crime, talking about taking on the Middle Eastern crime gangs and the notorious Bassem Hamzy. You'll also get an insight into the workings of the Homicide Squad and details of the Link Cafe siege from a person who knows it the best. See you next time. I Catch Killers is published by True Crime Australia. Produced by Claire Harvey from the Sunday Telegraph and Dylan Adams at Made in Katana. I'm now an investigative journalist at News Corp Australia, attached to the Sunday Telegraph. If you like the podcast, please subscribe to our newspapers.